For 10 years, one creature never left her side. I am the first memory. The girl cast out for her magic has just claimed her power and freed something that was chained to protect her. The dog she loved was never a dog at all. This is Chapter 14, The Shape Beneath the Fur.
The sanctuary of the Heart Grove had become a fading gold memory, but the forest remained. Within the deeper wood, the sacred peace of the willows gave way to a wilder and more tangled reality. Kaelin's left shoulder ached with a deep, throbbing heat, a reminder of the moment she had acted as a pillar for the stone-clad turtle. Every time she moved, the sigil of stonebark felt like a cold weight anchored to her arm. She navigated a world of thick undergrowth and indifferent trees that did not part to let her pass. The air no longer hummed with welcome. Instead, it carried the deep and impartial silence of the wild. The rescue had proven her strength, yet it had also stripped away her safety. A rhythmic vibration remained etched in her mind, the mathematical thuds of a predator that lacked a heartbeat. Kaelin had felt those footsteps through her very soul. She didn't know the identity of the shadow, only that the silence had found her scent. The journey was no longer just a quest. It was a fight from an advancing void. On her left forearm, the sigil of stonebark had settled into a persistent ache. It was not the sharp pain of an injury, but the feeling of a constant presence, a low force that pulled her steadily eastward. Whenever her focus waned, the vibration sharpened. It was a needle of magic forged in her own flesh. She followed the painful hint with a resolve that was both fierce and fragile. Sleep had arrived only in fits and starts since they had fled the sinkhole. The weight of her new reality was too heavy for true rest. Now, in the late afternoon of the following day, exhaustion acted as a lead cloak. While she navigated a steep embankment, her boot slipped on a patch of loose stones. A small cry escaped her lips as she pitched forward, flinging a hand down to catch herself. The moment her palm slapped against the rough granite, the earth answered. It was not a conscious act. It was an instinct as sudden as a flinch. A surge of power, cool and solid, flowed up from the sigil. For a breathtaking second, her hand felt fused to the rock. Her body became as stable and immovable as the embankment itself. The immense strength of the stone surged through her as if it were her own. The sensation vanished as quickly as it had arrived, leaving her breathless. Rowan stood a few feet ahead and looked back, a silent witness to the tremor of her connection. As they traveled east, an unwelcome scent snaked through the air. It was faint at first, easily mistaken for dry dust, but Kaelin knew it better than anyone. It was the sterile odor of the gray rot. Soon, the signs became visible. On the northern side of a tree, a patch of moss appeared. Its intricate patterns had been smoothed over, turning a uniform and brittle gray. A carpet of fallen leaves sat on the forest floor, yet the display was subtly wrong. The leaves appeared to be arranging themselves by size, their edges aligned in a way that was too neat and too orderly for nature. Every step produced a dry, lifeless crunch. The foliage crumbled to ash under her boots. This sight filled Kaelin with worry. In Edgehaven, the rot had been a misfortune. Here, it felt like an enemy. The threat the sentinel had spoken of was now a visible sickness in the world, a creeping stillness that made the pull in her arm feel like the ticking of a clock. That evening, they found a sheltered hollow between the roots of a great oak. Kaelin made a small, cautious fire. The flames pushed back the creeping twilight, a small pool of warmth in the growing dark. She broke the last of the honey cakes in two and offered half to her companion. Rowan took it gently from her fingers, his warm tongue brushing her skin. He settled at her feet to eat, his scruffy fur caked with mud from the sinkhole, and one ear had a fresh tear from the forest. But his presence was a solid anchor. She reached out and scratched behind his ears. The rough texture was a profound comfort. "I don't know what we'll find in there," she murmured, pointing at a distant break in the forest. Her voice was soft, absorbed by the immense silence of the woods. "The sentinel made it sound like a place that lies to you," she sighed, poking a stick into the fire. "But we'll face it, right?" Rowan lifted his head from his paws and nudged her hand, his one good eye fixed on her face with an unwavering intensity. He gave a soft whine. Kaelin forced a weary smile. As she looked into that intelligent eye, a flicker of something ancient looked back. It was a depth she had never noticed before, a profound and unsettlingly sad gaze. The expression vanished in an instant, leaving Kaelin with a faint, inexplicable chill. Sleep would not come. The fire had burned down to a bed of pulsing orange embers. A small, defiant heart of light against the absolute darkness of the deep woods. Kaelin lay wrapped in her thin shawl, the sigil of stonebark on her arm a dull, constant ache. But it wasn't the ache or the chill that kept her awake. It was Rowan. He hadn't settled by the fire as he always did, a warm, furry weight against her back. Instead, he was pacing at the very edge of the firelight, a restless, agitated shadow moving just beyond the reach of the dying flames. His movements were tight, his body tense. A low, continuous whine rumbled in his chest, a sound she had never heard from him before. It was not the growl of warning she knew so well, nor the soft whimper for food. This was a sound of profound strain, almost of pain, as if some great pressure were building inside him. "Rowan, what is it?" she whispered into the night, pushing herself up onto her elbows. "Is something out there?" He didn't seem to hear her, but he did stop his pacing and stood rigid, his head lowered, his entire body trembling. And then she saw it. A soft, silvery light began to seep from his body. It wasn't a reflection from the fire. It was a clean, pure luminescence that pulsed gently from beneath his scruffy, matted fur, outlining his tense form in a halo of cool white light. It was a magic unlike any she had encountered. It held none of the deceptive allure of the ghost lights, nor the raw elemental power of the heart grove. This felt ancient, personal, and impossibly sad. Kaelin scrambled back. Her heart jumped in a cold fit of shock and fear. "Rowan?" The ground beneath him began to react. The moss and damp earth ignited with a soft, ethereal glow. Faint, intricate symbols began to trace themselves on the ground around him, swirling in a slow, celestial dance. She recognized the spiral of stonebark, but there were others she knew only from the chaotic flood of the Heartwood's vision. A flowing wave of water, a flickering flame, a feathered leaf, a cracked circle. They were the echoes of the 9 sigils, drawn from the earth by the magic that was building to a breaking point. Rowan let out a sharp cry of pain, and his body was lifted from the ground. Kaelin's mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. Rowan floated, first an inch, then a foot into the air, suspended within the swirling vortex of light and sigils. His legs twitched, his body contorting as if fighting to break free from an invisible shell. The silvery light around Rowan intensified, collapsing inward until it was no longer a vortex, but a brilliant, silent cocoon of pure energy. It pulsed with a light so bright it bleached the color from the surrounding woods, casting the ancient trees in stark relief against a backdrop of impossible white. Kaelin threw a hand up to shield her eyes, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was a lone witness to a miracle or a nightmare. Within the cocoon of light, the familiar shape of her friend began to dissolve, It was not a violent tearing, but a melting, like a sculpture of snow surrendering to the sun. The scruffy, matted fur, the crooked leg, the scarred, one-eyed face. All the imperfections that had defined him, that had made him Rowan, unraveled into a pure, shimmering light. For a terrifying, hollow moment, there was nothing inside the cocoon but raw, formless energy. Then the light began to weave itself back together. It stretched and solidified, gathering into a new and impossible shape. A powerful, elegant spine took form, followed by long, graceful legs and a broad, strong chest. A magnificent head materialized from the light, its muzzle long and noble, its ears alert and pointed. A tail as thick as a winter fox's formed behind it. The result was one of breathtaking power and an ancient, wild grace. The cocoon of light dissolved with a soft, final sigh. Its energy sinking back into the earth. The creature it had birthed remained, floating for a moment in the stunned silence of the night. It was a wolf, a great wolf, larger than any she had ever seen in stories, with a magnificent moonlight pelt that seemed to drink in the embers of the fire and radiate a soft, silver luminescence of its own. It landed on the forest floor with a grace that was utterly soundless, its paws making no impression on the damp moss. Two eyes, both perfectly whole and glowing with a calm silver intelligence, fixed upon her. This was not a beast of the wild. This was a creature of myth, a spirit of the Elderbranch. Kaelin's breath was a knot in her throat. She was paralyzed by a mixture of sublime awe and primal terror. The wolf took a deliberate step toward her, its gaze holding hers, and a voice spoke. It did not come to her ears, which heard only the crackle of the dying fire. It bloomed directly in the center of her mind. A voice she had never heard, yet one that was loyal and so familiar it made her ache. It was a voice of ancient forests and starlit nights, deep and melodic. "It is all right, Kaelin." She could only stare, her mind a blank canvas of shock, unable to form a single thought. The wolf took another silent step, its silver eyes full of a patience that seemed as old as the stones around them. "You have called me Rowan." The voice in her head continued, a hint of ancient affection coloring the tone. "My true name is Feyheart." The world tilted. The cozy fire, the familiar trees, the very ground beneath her feet seemed to warp and shift. For 10 years, his silence had been her only constant, and all along it had been a cage. The name echoed in the vast silent space of her shock, Feyheart. It felt ancient, powerful, and utterly alien. But the presence behind the name, the steady, loyal spirit alive in her mind, was undeniably Rowan. The contradiction was too much. The dam of her composure, already cracked by a night of impossible magic, broke completely. You can talk?" She finally managed, her own voice a harsh, trembling whisper in the night. The sublime awe was swiftly being washed away by a sharp, biting sting of betrayal. She scrambled to her feet, taking a step back from the magnificent creature. "This whole time, all those years, you let me talk to you, cry to you? You watched them call me names, and you were silent?" The accusation hung in the air, raw and shaking. It was a child's hurt, dredged up from a decade of profound loneliness. All the nights she had whispered her fears into his matted fur. All the days his silent companionship was her only shield against the world's cruelty. The memory of it all was now tainted by this new, impossible truth. He could have answered, and he hadn't. Feyheart did not flinch from her anger. He sat on his haunches, his posture radiating a calm that was a gentle tide against her own emotional storm. He inclined his magnificent head, and a faint, ethereal sigil, a perfect circle enclosing a single, loyal, watching eye, glowed for a moment on his silver shoulder before fading. "I was bound, Kaelin," he explained, his mental voice a current of profound sadness and apology. I could not speak. I could not show my true self. Bound by what? The words came out sharper than she intended. Her anger still searching for somewhere to land. By a pact, the last your parents ever made. He let the words settle before he went on. It was their final gift to you, their last desperate act of love. Kaelin froze, the mention of her parents a sudden check on her anger. The accusation she had been holding faltered on her tongue. When they knew they could not return from the Heartgrove, Fayhart continued, his silver eyes full of a sorrow that mirrored her own. They forged one final pact. They bound me, a spirit of the Elderbranch, to you, a guardian. A guardian, she echoed. The word felt too large for the scruffy, one-eyed dog who had slept against her back for 10 years. Then why hide it? Why the silence? Because a spirit of my nature cannot walk openly through a dying wood. His gaze did not leave hers. The price of the binding was my voice and my true form. That was the cost of hiding me from the agents of the gray rot and the shadows that serve its silence. I was made small, a silent watcher, to keep you safe, always. His gaze flicked to the sigil of stonebark on her forearm, which seemed to hum in recognition. My own vow was chained to yours, he explained softly. The magic that silenced me could only be undone by your own willing acceptance of the pact. Your choice in the Heartgrove, it freed us both. The anger in Kaelin's chest didn't just fade, it collapsed, leaving a hollow ache in its place. The truth settled over her, heavy and heartbreaking. This wasn't a deception. It was another hidden sacrifice, another layer of her parents' desperate, all-encompassing love. They had not left her alone. They had left her with a guardian spirit, cloaked in the humble form of a stray dog, to keep her safe from the very dangers she was now destined to face. Fayhart's silence hadn't been a choice. It had been a shackle, forged by his loyalty to her. Tears she didn't know she had left to cry welled in her eyes, blurring the image of the magnificent wolf. She looked at him, and for the first time, she truly saw Fayhart. She saw not the scruffy, stray she had saved from the streets of Edgehaven, but a noble spirit who had chosen a cage to stand watch over her. The loneliness of her past was reframed, not as an absence, but as a silent, sworn guardianship. Slowly, her hand trembling, she closed the distance between them. She reached out, not to the head of a dog, but to the majestic, silver fur on the shoulder of a spirit wolf. It was softer than anything she had ever felt, and it seemed to radiate with the same clean, ancient magic as the Heartgrove itself. He leaned into her touch, a soft rumble of pure contentment, vibrating through his body and into her hand. In that simple, quiet connection, a decade of loneliness began to heal. The partnership of a girl and her dog was over. The alliance of a pact keeper and her guardian had just begun.
Kaelin's guardian wore the shape of a stray dog for 10 years. The question is, which guardian spirit would choose you? Take the guardian quiz. The link waits at the foundation of this record. Find out what walks beside you in the dark.